Joe a question. In the grease side, which obviously isn't my area of expertise, unfortunately, but will there be a need to change in the traditional roles of the industry and industry associations in developing new greases? It seems like in some of these specialty areas, the OEMs are doing their own thing, and there's not a uniform or standardization. What's your view on that?
Yeah, it's interesting because I'm listening and just even thinking through how some of the other areas work, and I think because of the bulk of oil and fuel that's sold in passenger car and heavy duty, there's a big need within the industry to have everybody get together and figure out what the specification should look like. It's interesting from the grease side. I'd like to ask later maybe how grease can fit into that better efficiency and better. There's a lot of things that you could think of that would work there from the grease side as well, that all the lubricants can feed into improving efficiency. Interestingly, I think the specifications in the one of the more global, at least in North America, and I think we've seen it in a lot of other regions, is the NLGI specification for GCLB, is commonly known. It's essentially developed for the automotive industry. It's meant to be for automotive chassis and wheel bearings. And it took roughly 30 years to develop those specifications because of the tests needed to support that. By the time it was rolled out in the mid 80s, there was much less, I'd say much less need for a general specification as people started to use their own individual specifications for individual needs within the automotive industry. But for the last 30 years now, that's been one of the main specifications that people could point to for a grease and say, this has some level of quality. This is specified or certified by NLGI. And so that symbol, I think, becomes a sign of a premium grease, if you will. But really, the root of it is aimed at the automotive industry. So what we looked at over the last 2-3 years and started to look at upgrading that specification because it was 30 years old and we wanted to make it more fit to modern purposes, we realized that we really needed something that was more aimed at high performance for the industry as a whole, for all uses. Automotive is just a very small portion of where grease gets used. So it doesn't make sense to kind of focus all the efforts on one very small area, but to build a building block with these core specifications that we've looked at with the high performance multi-use grease. So as I see that, I think that's an opportunity for NLGI, which its members include grease manufacturers, additive suppliers, test manufacturers. So we're trying to pull in OEMs, we're trying to pull in end users and get something as a kind of a community that fits everybody's needs and allows everybody to talk about what do we mean by high performance in the grease area with some sense of specified performance that everybody can agree on.
Chuck, I'd like to get your opinion in the same area, and I was just thinking as Joe was talking too, not to get off on a tangent, but you must also be under pressure, I assume, with, for example, the pricing of lithium going into batteries and new demands there in order to develop your specs, but have a product that's still competitive and you can sell in the market. So can you talk a little bit about that, but also about whether there's globalization or whether you think there'll be globalization of standards?
Wow, you just added a whole nother topic.
I know.
Lithium is a major topic of discussion. Let me more quickly hit on the standardization.
Okay, sure.
To build on what Joe said, and actually to step back even prior to GCLB and in the 30 years since, I mean, grease specifications are pretty much developed by OEMs. They know what they want for their equipment. Every grease application is different. One of the fascinating things about grease, frankly, is that there's not one grease or one grease type to solve a given application challenge. You can put a polyurea grease of a certain type or a lithium complex or a calcium sulfonate complex grease in the same application and solve the challenges in a different way. So grease is incredibly complex. Don't let anybody tell you it's a black art. It is a science. But to have standards is very, very difficult in grease. We don't have, an industry out there that's saying, or an association out there that's saying, these are the properties we need for all engine automotive greases. So what we have done, what Joe talked about, is we've developed a very high performance multi-use grease specification. And it's just that. It's not specific for an application. It's a high performance grease that can be used in a multitude of applications. But when you get down to specifics in the automotive industry, electrification, for instance, I've just seen over the last 12 months, every major oil company has launched a line of electric vehicle lubricants, including a line of greases. Well, they're all different. Nobody knows quite what they're doing yet. The needs for greases in electric vehicles varies by design. So is it something that's ever going to lend itself to standardization? Personally, I doubt it very much. I think the grease industry has to continue to be nimble and agile and develop greases to meet application requirements. And that is what we do. And to shift gears, take a 90-degree turn and talk about your lithium question, that is an issue. The lithium suppliers continue to assure that there's plenty of lithium out there in the world, either developed, being developed, or to be developed. But I understand that, if electric vehicles continue to grow, like they seem to be growing, it's going to put a real challenge to the grease industry, because we're the tail of the dog when it comes to lithium hydroxide usage. So there are other technologies available, sometimes at a greater cost, sometimes with a concern about compatibility, but there are other solutions, without a doubt. As you know today, or you probably know, 3/4 of the greases in the world are lithium based, lithium or lithium complex. That is shifting. It's slow, but it is shifting, and it'll continue to shift. And I don't think any of that has anything to do with standards.
Okay. When you talk about the high performance grease, are you talking about passenger car or heavy duty construction, mining? Are you talking about all applications, or is it for a particular sector or segment?
Well, it's very it's across the board. It is definitely not aimed at automotive. The GCLB spec that was started in the 60s and launched 30 years ago was definitely focused at wheel bearings and chassis. And it's still the only standard, certainly in North America, if not the world, that people can measure their performance of greases against. But this high performance multi-use spec is intended to be more of a kind of a universal grease for use in manufacturing plants and very much across the board in all kinds of facilities and applications that utilize grease that don't require a specialized grease. It is not a grease for every application. It's not designed for extreme high temperatures or extreme high loads. It's designed to be a very, very good multi-use grease with the ability, with 4 different enhanced categories, to provide additional performance in the areas of high load, saltwater corrosion resistance, water resistance, and low temperature performance. But again, it's not a specialty grease, but it is probably aimed more at industrial than automotive.
Just as a suggestion for us novices, we'll move on, but perhaps the naming convention could be more clear in the grease industry for people like me to be able to link the names with the applications a little bit better, but that's just me.